天下午的第一场，我们请到的是在Jabin University， 这个学校是在德里的郊区，一个叫诺伊达的地方。然后它是一个蛮新的学校。我们请到他国际关系及治理研究系的副教授郑嘉宾老师，这是他的中文名字。然后他的英语的名字叫做 Jabin Thomas Jacob。郑教授其实蛮有名的，在我还没有去印度之前，我就听说他的大名。Hi sir, it's very nice to our pleasure to have you here. I'm talking to our audience that you are very famous. Before I went to India before 2012, I already heard about your name.
Thank you. You're very kind.
Thank you, sir.
I'm not as famous as you think I am, but yes, I got a nice Chinese name, so I guess.
Yes. Okay, now we pass the time to you, sir. Now you can have plenty of time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Let me thank all of you for coming on a Saturday to attend this event. From India, far away, in India is actually the festival of Diwali today. So it's a festival of lights. So my Diwali greetings to all my Taiwanese friends.
Happy Diwali, sir. On behalf of all the Taiwanese audience, Happy Diwali.
Thank you. Thank you. So in the next 20 minutes or so, what I'd like to sort of do is give you a very realistic assessment of what the situation in India is for the business of Chinese language teaching. And I think before I start, I should thank the organizers for inviting me. Especially the Taiwan Education Center in India at the National Tsinghua University for this invitation. I'm not a Chinese language teacher, I'm not a Mandarin language teacher. I studied, but I studied in Taiwan for 2 years. So of course I did not study well enough, I guess, because my Chinese I don't think is very good. But I teach about Chinese foreign policy, and I teach international relations, including the role of science, technology, and science and technology in international relations. That's what I do right now at the Shivnagar University. But I have been involved for the last 15 odd years in trying to promote Chinese language teaching in India. And there were two reasons why I got interested, why I got involved in this entire process. One, like I said before, I had studied in Taiwan, and I was among the first few Indian students to study in Taiwan instead of mainland China. But I knew what the mainland Chinese system was of teaching language. And from all accounts, it is the Taiwanese system of teaching Chinese language that is the better method, because for multiple reasons. Classes are small. We study traditional Chinese. Taiwan and Taiwanese teachers are much longer experienced teaching Chinese to foreigners. So, and of course, Taiwan is a place where the best of Chinese culture is preserved. Plus, of course, it's a free country, so you can actually discuss and learn a lot of things freely, unlike in mainland China. The other reason why I got involved in the promotion of Chinese language teaching in India was because I was the assistant director of the Institute for Chinese Studies, Into in New Delhi, for about 6 years. So it was part of my job to actually look at ways in which we would promote Chinese studies and also therefore Chinese language in India. So because of these two opportunities, as a student in Taiwan as well as assistant director of the Institute of Chinese Studies, I had many opportunities to try different things, to promote the benefits of Taiwanese teachers teaching Chinese language in India, as well as to understand some of the big problems in this entire process. And I have to say that unfortunately, even though I started maybe around 2008 trying to tell people, look, why don't you take teachers from Taiwan? Why don't you, forget about Confucius Institutes from China, but take teachers from Taiwan? I mostly failed. And I think that's one good reason why you should listen to me carefully, because I fail most of the times. And I think failure is a good teacher. Yeah, I only really succeeded for the first time last year when I moved to Shivnara University only about 2 years ago, but the university had the facilities and had the resources. So for the first time, I was able to get two Taiwanese teachers through the Taiwan Education Center of the Taipei Economic and Cultural Representative's Office in India to teach Mandarin at my university. And now we have two teachers. And we have quite a number of students also interested. But what I want to talk about is, one, what are the challenges? And I specifically talk about political challenges, because I think if you are teachers trying to achieve something in India, the politics, the environment, all of this, you need to understand. And if you're entrepreneurs, if you're private entrepreneurs trying to start a business of Chinese language teaching, also you need to be able to understand the political issues involved and the sort of problems you might run up against. So that's what I'm trying to try and tell you. All right. So why did I fail all these years? Why has Taiwanese presence in India's Chinese language market been so low? I would give two reasons, as I indicated in my title. One is, of course, the lack of the political. There's a lack of political will, both on the Indian side as well as on the side of your government, or your government, present one, but your government in the past before. Second, and this is a crime we are all guilty of, short-term thinking and a lack of imagination. So let me start with the political story or the political situation. And I'm sort of going to be very frank because, after all, we are two free countries and we are interested in what is best for each other. Okay. So the first thing is in Taiwan. Let me talk about Taiwan. So when I was a student in Taiwan, Chen Shui-bian was the president, and the DPP was in power. But now the screen has sort of come together a little more closely, so I can see my Indian colleague Sana Hashmi in the audience. So if you don't understand any of what I said, you can ask her afterwards over tea or coffee, and she will explain everything. But in 20 minutes, I'm going to try and say things much faster. So when DPP first came to power, it knew it wanted to be different from China, but it did not really, it was trying to consolidate inside Taiwan, not too much attention to the outside world except the United States. And today, with President Tsai Ing-wen in place, she has the new southbound policy. I think she has a much clearer vision that Taiwan cannot only depend on the United States or Japan or the Western countries, but it needs India also in its corner. So I think that clarity is there. And but in between, I think there was a lot of time wasted, time lost. There were not enough scholarships, or scholarships did not grow as fast as they could have between Taiwan and India. And there is a mistake that I thought that Taiwanese diplomats, Taiwanese interlocutors, political interlocutors constantly made, which is that they did not realize that Taiwan is a very small country and that India is a big country. I'm sorry, I don't want to sound like Yang Jiechi or Xi Jinping in this thing, that China is a big country and the rest of you are small countries. No, I don't want to sound like that, but it's just a bit of, I'm trying to tell you what the difficulties were from the Indian side. So India did not have the sort of time or attention to give Taiwan, whereas Taiwanese always said, look, give us equality, all right? Now, there were much more insistence on protocol and equality and so on, and a lot of time was wasted, I think. Now it's all changed. I think now the Taiwanese side is much more realistic. Now the problem, I think, it's really on the Indian side, that it is very slow in changing some policies and so on. Now, one policy that India will not change immediately or anytime soon will be the One China policy. But having said that, I think there are many things that we can still do. But in terms of problems, Indian bureaucracy, it moves very slowly. Indian politicians, like you have a concern with China, we are constantly concerned with Pakistan. And just now we are beginning to become more worried about China. But in general, things move very slowly, all right? And there is an unwillingness to understand that while Taiwan might be a small country in size, in population, I come from the state of Kerala in the southwest of India. And Kerala and Taiwan roughly the same area and roughly the same population. Kerala is about 30 million people and Taiwan I think is about 23 million plus. But India or Indians don't seem to understand while Taiwan might be a small country, it is essentially a middle power in terms of economic capacity and even to an extent military capacity. So if you don't understand this, Indians made a mistake of not engaging properly with Taiwan. Okay, so this is the background generally, and I come to the more important part, which is the second part of what I call short-term thinking and a lack of imagination. So in the case of Taiwan, I mentioned that the DPP today is much more realistic. It has a new realism. But this is a realism that is there within the highest echelons of the DPP. President Tsai, Foreign Minister Joseph Wu, and the strategic community. But this realism has not yet come down to the ground and matched by ordinary Taiwanese or Taiwanese private entrepreneurs. So even though President Tsai has a new southbound policy, the South for most Taiwanese is generally Southeast Asia. It doesn't really come to India. And so I must thank you and congratulate you for, breaking out of this straitjacket and being willing to think about India. I think the time that you spend in this room today will stand you in good stead, and I think you are making a big and important decision, a strategic decision, by starting to focus on India. Because frankly, given what all has been happening in the India-China relationship in the last few months, India's policy towards China will change now drastically. There will be greater confidence in India to engage with Taiwan, with other countries that have common interests with India in dealing with an aggressive, rising China. You are taking a risk because it's still early days, but I'm sure, your risk taking will be well rewarded, all right? There are lots of opportunities in India, especially now with a great deal of interest in China that Taiwan can exploit, all right? And I'll sort of talk a bit about India before I come to the opportunities. Now, in India also, what are the short-term thinking or the lack of imagination? I think there's always been inadequate preparation. We are, our politicians, a big country. There are a lot of problems. You see how we are handling COVID. Not very well, right? But always India seems to get into start working only when there is a crisis. There's not adequate preparation to preempt a crisis. It's always in an emergency mode that we tend to act. But in this particular case, I think it's a good thing for Taiwan, because without the crisis with China, I don't think most Indians would have heard about Taiwan or learn to pay enough attention to Taiwan. Now I know that Sana, has been active on Twitter, on social media, and also my other colleague in this session after me, Namrata. Both of them have been extremely active in trying to tell ordinary Indians and the strategic community in India about the importance of Taiwan, how important Taiwan is to India, that size alone is not the issue that one should be looking at. So in terms of opportunities, all right, what are the opportunities that Taiwanese have with respect to India? Now you are all language teachers or interested in the language teaching business. Let me just talk about this. And all what I said about the political factor will come into play here. Most Indians are now interested in China, all right? They never thought that the relationship with China would be such that we would actually lose soldiers on the border with China. Everybody's said Pakistan, India-Pakistan fighting, people dying, very normal. But India-China fighting and people dying, that's very new. So now a lot of Indians are interested in China. A lot of my students are interested in learning Chinese language because they want to figure out, hey, what is China all about? But as I keep telling them, the more, or as I think you should also know, we are not learning, we might in the beginning learn Chinese language or Mandarin to understand China, but it will not be limited only to China. It will also be about Taiwan. It will also be about history, culture, food, and I think Taiwan or your role as teachers can contribute to that. There are different kinds of interests. So there is an interest of students. There is now an interest of businessmen because the Chinese market is more or less shut, but they continue to understand that the market, the supply chains that come out of East Asia or including Taiwan remains important. And with India's emphasis on high-tech development, our Make in India program, I think we are beginning to realize that the source of much of China's technological development has usually been Taiwan. So it's time to pay attention to Taiwan. It's time to understand what's going on in Taiwan. So businessmen are interested in Chinese language. Our strategic community, our government offices, departments, they are also interested in Chinese language, much more so than before. And I think we are at a very interesting point today in India where everybody has woken up and understood that, well, you can't go slow on China, that you have to act quickly. And the only option that people see within the government also, they begin to realize that Taiwan is the way forward. So, what I would encourage you is to think about how you can not just sit in Taiwan and do something about India, but come to India and set up shop in India. I'm sure this has been already talked about in the previous sections and so on. But to my knowledge, I would say look at where we are today. There's only one Taiwanese, entirely Taiwanese run organization or teaching setup in Delhi region, which is called Hanyu Chinese. I'm sure some of you know about it. But it's a very small outfit. There's only so many people or students it can teach at one given time. But you can literally have hundreds of Chinese or Mandarin Chinese language enterprises in just Delhi National Capital Region. Because this is where all the government offices are, this is where a lot of businesses are, this is where a lot of private universities and state universities are, and so on. What I would say is create a consortium, maybe 5-6 of you can come together and focus on different cities. You can focus individually on key cities, or cities such as Bombay, Delhi, Calcutta, which already have some Chinese language, institutions, or you can focus on new areas, more in the other state or provincial capitals in India, which do not have access to Chinese, but which will now be interested in learning Chinese. you can partner with Taiwanese enterprises who are already invested in India. It's kind of like the Japanese and the Korean model, where Japanese and Korean companies come and they want people speaking Japanese and Korean, so they employ teachers to teach their employees Japanese or Korean so that they can interact much more smoothly and fluently. At an institutional level, since this is being organized by the National Tsinghua University, I mean, National Tsinghua University is the leader in this anyway. But I think you can really expand in a big way to partner with other universities. And I am in touch with the education division of the TECC in Delhi to see how this can be expanded. And as we speak, there's at least 6 different Indian universities that are trying to set up Taiwan education centers in their campuses, right? And including mine, which set it up last year. But next year, we will need, I think I need another 2 more teachers, or maybe even 4 teachers. So just one university will have 6 Taiwanese teachers in 1 year's time, 1 more year's time. So I think this institutional focus can be there. But I would say that if you can work together more with your government, maybe the Department of, or the Ministry of Commerce, or the Ministry of Industry, and see whether you can help those ministries to set up language training specifically for government departments in India. Maybe the Ministry of Commerce in Taiwan try to get in touch with the Ministry of Commerce in India and see whether something can be done on subjects that are specifically related to those ministries. And here, I would say, increasingly the one China policy that the Indian government has is not such a big issue. People in India are now beginning to become much more open to the idea of interacting with Taiwan, and this can actually be one way forward in which, so you don't do only one thing. You don't only try and work with universities. You have to try multiple things in order to get the maximum rate of success. And I would say that many of you, since you have taken the risk to be in this room to listen to me, I would encourage you to please take a little more risk and come to India whenever the flights start flying again and see and explore for yourself. I'm sure many of you have been to India already. And then, maybe we'll meet up in India and I can tell you in much greater detail about what to do and what not to do. Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for your candidate advice and the in-depth observation. And we are very welcome your suggestion. And thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for the business advice. 刚刚老师他提了几个可以过去做生意的点，我只听到这一个，没有了，这是重点。就是他叫我们可以大家一起组团，然后去那边到不同的大城市去开创我们的华语事业。他呢可以在那边跟他们的商业单位、商业机构联系，然后我们一起大家把这个市场做大。这是我听到最重要的地方，跟大家分享一下。那请问大家，我们现在有10分钟的提问时间，5分钟的提问时间，有没有人有问题？对刚刚他讲的对老师讲有没有什么东西有问题？哦，好，请。So there is one question.
Hello, sir. Happy
Hi.
Diwali to you.
Happy Diwali.
I'm currently the Mandarin chapter in SM University in Chennai, and I'm really happy to hear that you encourage everyone in Taiwan to go to India to involve the Chinese business in India. I would like to inquire, what is the difficulty during you try to persuade those people to accept the Taiwanese teacher in their institute or in their business?
So I don't think there is a difficulty as such. Institutions do not have a problem. They are all happy to take Chinese language teachers. The problem is really one of expectations. One of the big things you have to understand is that Indian students have a different work culture. They're constantly under pressure. I mean, you were teaching in IIT Chennai. It's one of the India's top universities. So Indian students might join a Chinese language course, discover that it is very difficult, and they drop it. Okay, because they are used to learning other languages like French or German, which they find much easier. But the problem is that Taiwanese teachers should be ready for this. It's not like American or Russian students coming to Taiwan, or even me coming to Taiwan to learn Chinese, because we are interested in Chinese. We are focused on this. But when you're coming to a market like India, where there are so many options, you have to be ready, saying even if 20 people join, maybe 5, 10 will drop out. But there is still 10 students who will be interested, who will continue. And even if in India, 10 students, I mean, even if you are only getting 5% of students serious in class, 5% in Indian population is a very large number. It is much larger than the population of Taiwan. So I have to say that you have to be a little patient. The problem is really about expectations, and you have to be patient. It will come. I mean, even in my university, in the beginning, first 6 months, it's kind of hard. The teachers were confused. Students were joining, students were dropping out, students were coming after 2 weeks, and then trying to figure out how to understand everything. But after that first 6 months, I think the students and the teachers settle down, then the relationship is better. And students enjoy Chinese language because they say that this teacher teaches very differently from all our other teachers. Indian teachers are very boring. Taiwanese language teachers are much more fun. They're always jumping, moving around class, and so on. So many students actually enjoy it. And while students might not be able to communicate, I want you to understand that they appreciate you a great deal.
Thank you, sir.
还有问题吗？还有没有问题 ？Thank you, sir. There's no more question. Oh, sorry.
Good afternoon, Professor. I'm a student from Kaohsiung Teachers University. I'm a graduate student. This question that since yesterday, I'm keeping asking myself that this meeting is quite special for me, and this is the first time that I ever hear something from the Indian side about the culture teaching or the language teaching. That's Indian country that you need a lot number to help you. And I know that there's a war and border between China and Taiwan, right? Now here's a question I would like to ask you. That as you can know, that most Taiwanese people, they are quite tender. And I wish this won't offend you, that I doubt if those students or the young teachers who being invited to come to India will use that promise that we won't get involved of this impact that happened in the board of India in China. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a very important question, and I will tell you that in history, India has not done well. In '62, when we first had the conflict between India and China, there was a case where many ethnic Chinese in India were actually picked up and interned because the government thought, they were suspicious. But I think we have moved a long way from that, all right? And that's a very tragic story. And big governments never apologize, right? China never apologizes for Tiananmen or Tibet. The Americans never apologize for the way they have treated the Native Americans or Black Africans. Indian government also never apologizes for anything. So big countries behave like that. But I think, unlike 20 years ago when I was first traveling to Taiwan and the immigration officer was asking, hey, where is Taiwan? I mean, are you going to China? I said, no, I'm not going to China, I'm going to Taiwan. That is no longer the case. I think educated Indians know the difference. And there is a great deal of problems in India for sure. You know, it's not just Chinese or Japanese or Koreans. In the northeast of India, we have people, you know, who are also discriminated against in India. I mean, I'm from South India, and I live in North India. It's not easy for me either in Delhi, okay? But you can say, oh, but it's not the same. For me, as a South Indian in North India, can also be quite difficult. So, but this is a big country, and I think you know, both sides have to be open to the experience. I mean, when I was in Taiwan, you know, this is the height of the war on terror, and people used to look at me because, you know, well, you're cool, sir. You know, hey, you should be loving the PP ma. So, you know, and I could get offended about it, but you know, I'm not, because I say, okay, people are just getting used to others. So you need to take time for this. But politically, I could assure you, there will be no problems. You have a Taiwanese hoja or a passport, you are Taiwanese, you will not be affected or discriminated against officially by the government. In fact, the government is encouraging Taiwanese to come. The visa process for Taiwanese, the entire paperwork for Taiwanese, now in the government they say, oh, you're from Taiwan? Okay, no problem. No problem. But if you're from TRC, yes, of course there's a problem. So I would say this is no longer an issue. You don't have to worry about this so much. But it's a good question, and it's important for teachers and students and travelers to Taiwan, from Taiwan, coming to India, to be aware of it. But this will no longer be a serious issue for you. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, sir. We all regret that the time is very limited. So thank you, sir, again, and CPC hope to see you in person in the near future. Take
Okay,
care.
thank you all, and happy Diwali to you. Bye-bye.